Pastor Creflo Dollar was regarded for a long time as a guy selected by God, a leader whose words had the power to transform people's lives. People adored his self-assurance, his fluid delivery, and the optimism he offered in his sermons. Thousands of people followed his message of blessings and wealth, and his name became a symbol of faith and success. However, there was another story, one that few people ever knew, behind the brilliant lights of the pulpit and the cheers of his audience. Tina Dollar, his wife, had supported him through it all. She had seen him go from being a pastor in a tiny village to a national celebrity. She had supported her through every hardship, sermon, and prayer. However, something had changed recently. His remarks seemed less like genuine faith and more like prepared lectures. The weight of secrets he refused to divulge had replaced the warmth she had once seen in his eyes. Unbeknownst to her at the time, Tina's life was about to change in ways she could never have predicted. In addition to upending her marriage, the truth she was going to learn would cast doubt on everyone's perceptions of the guy they referred to as pastor. When Tina Dollar's voice was first heard by the public, it was full of truth rather than rage or retaliation. She had spent years living in the shadow of a man who was viewed as ideal by others, a man who preached about light but gradually lost sight of it himself. Her bravery in speaking was more about releasing her spirit from the oppressive quiet than it was about damaging her reputation. Silence may sometimes be more powerful than words, and Tina had been carrying that silence for too long. Her experience serves as a reminder that even those who stand in front of thousands of people can conceal themselves behind walls of pride and fear. When things are going well, it's simple to discuss grace, but when things start to go wrong, genuine faith is put to the test. Strength isn't about never breaking. Rather, it's about rebuilding after being damaged, as seen by Tina's path through suffering and epiphany. She left her marriage because love without honesty becomes a cage, not because she lost faith in love. The fall was painful but crucial for Creflo. Applause frequently overpowered his guilt during the decades he had spent living under the bright lights. However, he was left with nothing but his reflection and the reality he could no longer avoid when the lights went out and the stage was deserted. At that moment, he started to grasp the true meaning of humility. He stood in front of his congregation for the first time without the elegant clothing and the assured voice, and he spoke with sincere sadness. He discussed the perils of pride, forgiveness, and mistakes. Some people stayed because they saw a guy attempting to find his way back to grace, not because they saw perfection. Many others turned away, reluctant to forgive. People tend to come full circle in life. Tina's modest, nonprofit gradually expanded, assisting women in rebuilding their lives and finding their voices. Every time she told her story, she served as a reminder that the truth heals rather than destroys. She always talked with knowledge rather than resentment. Peace, not fame or attention, was the source of her strength. As time passed, people started to view her as a woman who transformed her suffering into a purpose rather than as the wife of a well-known preacher. Creflo traveled more slowly. He lost a lot of the things he once cherished, such as his fortune, his fan base, and his pride, but perhaps that was the intention. Sometimes we have to lose everything in order to realize what is really important. His tone softened and his sermons became more straightforward. He began preaching about second chances and the subdued beauty of salvation instead of wealth or success. The fact that he now believed in truth was more important than whether or not people choose to believe in him once more. Ultimately, this was never a scandal story. It was a tale of truth, the kind that causes pain, healing, and transformation. Tina's choice to speak altered not just her own life, but also the lives of those who heard her. It demonstrated that faith is about living honestly, even when doing so costs you everything, rather than about preserving one's reputation. Perhaps this story's moral is that love isn't about control and forgiving isn't about forgetting. It's about having the freedom to speak the truth, even if your voice falters. Tina's journey serves as a reminder that everyone is susceptible to the truth, regardless of their seeming strength. And Creflo's collapse serves as a reminder that grace still awaits those who genuinely seek it, even in the face of complete loss. Because every broken tale has an opportunity to start over. Sometimes, people who have learned to rise after the fall deliver the most impactful sermons in whispers rather than from a pulpit. Creflo and Tina's early years were straightforward but filled with faith. With just a few members seated in worn-out wooden chairs, they established their tiny church in a rented hall. On Sundays, Creflo would prepare his message while Tina set up the microphones. They both thought that their goal was to show people that faith could move mountains and to draw people closer to God. The audience grew slowly. As more individuals arrived, additional donations flowed in. The church became a movement as the sermons grew more powerful. As television cameras began to appear, Pastor Creflo Dollar became well known outside of the community. The comforts of success such as a lovely home, pricey vehicles, and sophisticated outfits, came with renown. They appeared to the outside world to be the epitome of a fortunate marriage. But something didn't feel right to Tina. The modest man she used to pray with every morning was suddenly too preoccupied to spend time alone. Family dinners had been replaced by meetings, interviews, and travel. A tiny portion of her heart started to feel aloof, despite the fact that she smiled in public. She continued to have faith in the mission, but she couldn't shake the faint suspicion that their ascent might be costing them more. The cracks. When temptation and faith collide, little fissures started to show through the polished picture as the years went by. Tina saw changes that were beyond her comprehension. Sudden excursions out of town, late-night phone calls, and mysterious financial decisions were the norm. Creflo would claim that everything was for the ministry, but the truth in his eyes had faded. He grew aloof at home, cautious about meetings, and possessive of his phone. He would remind her of loyalty and faith when she raised questions. These phrases used to reassure her but now felt like barriers between them. Tina started to hear rumors from churchgoers about relationships that didn't seem harmless and about money being squandered. She wished that none of it was real. She prayed for clarity every night, asking God to reveal what was concealed. However, her heart felt heavier the more she prayed. She began writing things that didn't make sense in a little journal. She secretly worried that everything they had created would be destroyed by the truth, but the stillness was getting too unbearable. The breaking point, the revealed truth. Tina was organizing ministry documents in her home office one calm evening. She discovered a printed email exchange between Creflo and an unfamiliar name among the files. As she read the words emotional, intimate, and far too personal for a married man of God, her heart raced. It was a betrayal of everything they had taught together, not just of love. She started crying as she attempted to figure out why everything had gone so badly. When she questioned him, he initially denied it before becoming irate and accusing her of spying. Tina sat by herself in the living room that evening, gazing at the wall-mounted cross. She came to see that the man who had formerly talked of grace and truth was hiding behind a mask. She had shielded him from his detractors, preserved his reputation, and trusted that God would make things right for years. However, she now saw that silence was not a sign of faith. Despite her broken spirit, she started to develop a new type of strength that would allow her to confront the truth at all costs. The exposure, the point at which silence turns into a sin. Before Tina made her choice, months of silent suffering went by. His secrets were too much for her to bear. She contacted a reliable friend who assisted her in telling her side of the tale out of honesty rather than retaliation. For the first time, she revealed the lies, deceit, and loneliness she had concealed beneath her smile, and her voice faltered. People were taken aback. Some didn't believe her, claiming she was attention-seeking or resentful. After years of ignoring the flaws, others eventually noticed them. Tina maintained her composure and spoke clearly and gracefully. She whispered, "I am not here to destroy anyone. The truth should be heard, which is why I'm here." Her statements quickly gained traction, and before long, everyone was praising her bravery. For many, what started out as a scandal gradually evolved into a time for introspection, serving as a reminder that truth always comes to light and that even spiritual leaders are fallible. The repercussions, salvation or destruction. The world responded swiftly. The story was picked up by news sources, and attitudes on social media were divided. While some condemned the hypocrisy, others defended Pastor Creflo by pointing out that none was flawless. Donations stalled, church attendance declined, and the once bright ministry started to wane. Tina had opted for peace over conflict, despite Creflo's attempts to contact her. She formed a tiny foundation to support women who had suffered in silence and relocated to a smaller house away from the commotion. Her heart grew lighter, but her days grew quieter. Conversely, Creflo had to go through a challenging process of introspection. He took the stage by himself for the first time in years and spoke about forgiveness rather than success. His struggle was evident to others. He was a man who had to learn humility the hard way. Tina had already experienced healing from the journey. However, it was unclear if his forgiveness would be accepted. Although the truth had caused her much pain, it had also liberated her. Reflective and emotional outro. Ultimately, this tale involved more than simply a failed marriage and a deceased preacher. It was about how courage can shine light into the darkest places and how truth may upend even the strongest foundations. For many others who were frightened to speak, Tina's voice became a symbol, demonstrating that quiet only serves to shield lies. People were reminded by Creflo's demise that honesty and humility, rather than fame or fortune, are the true measures of faith. As time went on, they each discovered fresh avenues that might have brought them closer to true harmony than before. They had both learned from life that love without honesty is a shadow and faith without truth is worthless. Tina moved forward in silence, her spirit at last free and her story no longer concealed, as the world gradually forgot the headlines.